Good evening and welcome to Money Matters. I'm your host, Brian Kohute from HJ Wealth Management. My co-host is Jane Scaccetti from Drucker and Scaccetti. She's the CEO there. Our special guest is Laura Kelly from the Handwork studio. Jane, good to see you.
Good to see you.
You know, as I said, this show is taped, so we tell our viewers not to make any decisions from here, but you know, it's tax season for you. And specifically, I have a question. You know, obviously the baby boomer is starting to retire, and their tax situation becomes very different in retirement. So what are you seeing out there?
I'm seeing a need for people like you to sit down and talk. No, this is seriously. I mean, you know, many of the pension plans are really developed around tax deferral. Right? So you put money into a 401k or into your KEO or into a SEP in some fashion, and in the Roth a little bit different there because that's a permanent deferral, but in most cases you're just deferring the time to pay the taxes. So how you treat your taxable accounts, your tax deferred accounts and your tax free accounts are very different. So tell me, what are you telling clients? And what, you know, I would imagine retirement planning has become, you know, the real buzzword these days.
It really has. You know, obviously, you know, as a baby boomer gets serious about retiring, you know, they've accumulated assets, but never much thought about the drawdown strategy. So, you know, we work with people like you. Like we actually make a yearly, you know, withdrawal strategy, and it could change year to year based off tax situations. But you know, if the client needs X dollars, what's the most optimal tax buckets to take it from? You know, and then kind of reset that.
Do you work with your clients too on looking at what that drawdown should be, how to determine how much they can spend?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, so you know, we're financial planners first and foremost. So every client of ours has a financial plan because we're trying to get to that magic number, and more importantly, let's not run out of money, right? And I always tell my clients, dying early is not a problem for me. It might not be good for you, but you know, what keeps me up at night is the fear of running out of money, right? So yeah, so what's the optimal number? Do you have enough? And quite honestly, it's a hard question. You know, people don't know what they need, right? And
you know what I have found too is everyone assumes that they'll spend less in retirement, and that's not what happens. Whether it's because of grandchildren and the desire to do more for your children, our children are not making the kind of income that we had an opportunity to make, so we are all still helping many of our children try to move along in life and get their careers and their savings. And so what I find is that when people retire, they spend as much, if not more, in retirement, not less.
Absolutely. And a 65-year-old retiree can be very healthy, right? And active. I mean, we tell our clients, retirement's front-loaded. You will spend 100% of what you spend now. For some period of time. There certainly will be a drop-off, right? Our clients in their 80s slow down.
Absolutely.
But it is front-loaded, right? And so people come in and there's these rules of thumb, 80% of what you earned. They're just not valid, you know? I mean, it's really personal to and the other problem is, you know, the inflation costs, you know, everyone's little expenses are different, right? So, you know, if you have kids.
So do you do some of the rule of thumb, like if you're going to, you know, spend down 4% of your assets a year and inflation's at 1.5%, then you better be earning 5.5% during those retirement years. If not, you're biting into principal. And is that 4% a number you use?
It's a starting point. You know, it's a fair number, and it seems to hold up. I mean, there's a lot of new research coming out that maybe it's not the optimal, and it varies, but it's a safe number to start with.
Too low or too high?
Yeah, I mean, you know, what they're saying is, you know, the order of returns matter, right? So if you retire and unfortunately the market doesn't cooperate, you still need to take your living expenses out. It's much harder to recover out of that. You know, so what they're trying to say is, well, you should have a flexible spending budget. I'm like, well, good luck. Hey, retiree, if the market's bad, don't pay your bills. I mean, I don't know how you have a flexible spending budget.
You know, and it goes back to, I remember a couple of times, you know, clients, even myself, you buy that second home, that vacation home, and you always say, but when I retire, I realize I have to sell it. And then the time comes to retire and no one wants to sell.
And the kids will kill you if you do it, right?
So you end up having two homes that you're trying to, and that's, you know, it is about getting your fixed costs down.
Absolutely.
It really, really is.
If I was talking to somebody and we were saying, like, the fastest way to go broke is to accumulate a lot of houses.
That's right.
Right? Because, you know, that costs a lot of money to carry them.
I watched one time, I did a sort of unofficial survey to look at my clients to see who retired well, and they generally had one home.
A pension?
They generally had a pension. A lot of them were doctors because doctors were really encouraged to put money into pensions when the pension plan rules for the self-employed doctors were a little more liberal than for everyone else. Now they're pretty much the same. And they really, at some point stopped paying for their children in some fashion,
right.
And they kept their fixed costs down. Now, that's a hard recipe.
It's a hard recipe.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. No one wants to hear it, and everyone convinced, well, that vacation home was the best investment they made, and I always say, yeah, for the kids, because that's who's going to benefit from it, right? You get to pay the cost, they get to sell it at the end. So, yeah, it's hard. I mean, expenses are only going up, and we see it with health insurance. The idea of retiring early, right? There's one. Was very common, but now just the cost of health insurance alone, right before you can go to Medicare at 65, is pretty significant.
Though we do find that living in Pennsylvania, this is a state that is very, very kind to retirees.
Yes.
So retirement income is not taxed.
Yeah, it is a good retirement state.
Right. So and then the tax rate itself, at least now, and we say this is taped, so we don't know what our new governor may be doing. But the tax rate is still at 3.07%, relatively low when compared to the surrounding states.
Yes, I live in Jersey, so I know the pain.
There you go. You have a lot of pain.
Yes, a lot of pain. Yeah. It's not a great state to retire in.
Maybe not a great state to be taxed in.
It's not a great state to be in at all, probably. So do you get into that? We get this question all the time. Hey, I want to retire. I'm flexible where I live. Obviously Florida is the choice, for most people because there's no state tax.
Yeah, there's no state tax, but then you have to factor in a whole bunch of other taxes, like other costs, like are you going to be flying home often because your children live in some other part? So will you have additional expenses associated with flight? It used to be that you'd even look at the cost to call home and stuff. That's now out of the. But still just travel expenses and then some of the other expenses. But yeah, sure, you do look at that. A lot of people don't want to retire and live in New Jersey or retire and live in New York or California because of the high tax.
Right.
So
yeah.
it's a factor.
Yeah. It's funny. I had a client who wanted to retire to California, and I'm like, really?
Yeah.
So you might want to run the numbers on that one. So.
Yeah.
Are you seeing anything, I guess, around tax planning strategies? As I know a lot of your clients have options and probably restricted stock. What do you tell them, before they retire? I mean, do they really have to start thinking about that in advance?
So they do, and it's an area where the states have become very, very smart, because what people used to do is try and hold off on exercising their options until they moved out of the state, which is still a valid strategy depending on what kind of options we're talking about. But clearly, as they're looking to retire and they're taking out non-deferred comp, or they're taking non-qualified deferred plans, or they're taking out qualified deferred plans, or they're exercising options, you need to run all the variables to see what will be taxed and where. Will it be taxed in Philadelphia, not just in Pennsylvania? So the tax piece of that is complicated, but you can run the numbers.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's our message, as same as yours, is. Don't show up to retirement with your accounts and say, what do I do now?
Right. Or this is what I did.
Right. Or, hey, guess what? I exercised a bunch of options.
Yeah, this is what I did.
Can you save me on taxes?
Yeah.
So, some of the other things we're seeing, we talked about mandatory distributions, at one of the shows. We're at 7.5, we're actually, and I don't know if you're seeing this, we're seeing an opportunity if a client gets in a low tax bracket, they retire at 65, maybe to start taking some withdrawals out of the retirement accounts early, right? Because conceptually was like defer, wait till you have to. But if we can pull some money out of the low tax bracket, it lowers the requirement at 7.5.
Yeah.
And some people may even do conversions.
Right.
Have you seen a lot? Have you seen a lot of conversions?
I'm seeing a lot of the backdoor conversions.
Right, yeah.
So
I like that one as well.
Yeah. Why don't you explain that one?
Backdoor conversion, a little bit of loophole in the tax law. Most people, if you make too much money, cannot fund a Roth IRA directly. What the backdoor says is, well, you can make a non-deductible IRA contributions and then turn around and convert that to a Roth IRA because there's no income restriction on conversions. Right. It gets messy if you have other other IRA accounts, but there's ways to solve that problem too.
So if you have a SEP IRA, is that considered an IRA? So you wouldn't be allowed to do it, but if you had a KEO, you could, because that's not an IRA?
Yeah. So what we do, if our client has a SEP, we actually make it a 401k plan. Typically, a SEP's for self-employed individuals. They don't have other. The actual individual 401k rules are more favorable than SEP rules. So we'll convert it into a 401k, and that just solved the IRA problem. We now
and
do
a
not
KEO is not an IRA, so you wouldn't have that problem?
Right, it's a profit sharing plan. So we would typically make
Okay.
Even the profit share, we make a 401k just because inside the 401k you have that Roth feature as well, right? So instead of doing the non-deductible, if they're still funding it, they can fund into the Roth 401k now. So yeah, so we're big fans of the 401k.
Right.
You know, we see a lot of times when we see SEPs, we
and
automatically.
how do you convert them? You actually
we created a 401k plan and just
contribute to it
and just roll it right into it. Exactly. Right. So you have time for a question?
Yeah.
So probably more for me, but I'll start it with you. So Nancy Gaines from Plymouth Meeting asks, how does a rising dollar affect investments in the U.S.?
So I'm going to push that back to you. I will tell you that I know when people announce their earnings, when companies announce their earnings and they have a large amount of overseas operations, they'll tell you how overseas they made a lot of money, but when they converted those dollars back into US, they lost money. So
yeah, and that's great. I mean, that's exactly what we're hearing, right? Multinational companies that have foreign earnings, when they bring them into US dollars, this dollar's stronger, it's a hit to their earnings. If you live in the US, your investments are all in the US, you could care less, right? The dollar, if you're traveling abroad, you like it because it's now cheaper to go to Europe, right? But for most people, it shouldn't really matter.
And how about products that are imported from overseas?
Yeah, so one of the problems is it's more expensive, right? So we're less competitive, right, in the international marketplace because our goods are expensive when they're in U.S. dollars. So that's why we're getting an earnings hit as well, is because there's less demand, for our products as well. So for the individual, that's there's a lot of talk in the news about it, but it really shouldn't matter. It shouldn't affect what they do day to day. So. So thank you for that answer. If you have a question, here's how you send your question to Money Matters.
You can have your questions answered on Money Matters. Please go to our website, money-matterstv.com. On our homepage, click on the banner on the right that says Send Us Your Questions. While you're on our website, you can find information about our host and guests, as well as show notes and links about this show and past shows. Money Matters is also available as a podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, so you can listen to Money Matters while you're on the go. That website address, again, is money, MONEY, -matters, MATTERS, TV.com.
Welcome back. Now it's time to introduce our special guest, Laura Kelly, CEO of the Handwork Studio. So first of all, what is it, and how did you actually come up with this idea?
Thank you. Thanks for having me. The Handwork Studio is a kids' needle arts community. So we teach knitting, crocheting, machine sewing, fashion to kids ages 3 to 16. Wow. Sort of a unique kind of a thing. Not a lot of people are doing it. We're really very fortunate, and I think that's been part of our success, is because there's sort of a hole in the marketplace for this. And the idea came about when my children were in preschool. And I was probably that first generation of helicopter moms that didn't want to send their kids to school, but intuitively I knew that it was a smart thing not to homeschool them. So when I was looking for schools, I found this adorable school that was in the basement of a church. And in there they had handwork as part of the curriculum. So all the children, the little kindergartners, were making woodland creatures. And the first graders were knitting, and the second graders were embroidering. And I stood there in the doorway of this basement church and I started to cry, because to me that felt like love. Doing these kinds of activities felt very nurturing, and it was the kind of environment that I wanted my kids to be in. And so what I ultimately ended up doing is we stayed at the school for a number of years, and it turned out not to be the right place for us. So when we left the school, I ended up taking the best part with me, which was handwork. And so we hired the teacher, and we test marketed it at my kitchen table for 2 years, just to see if other neighborhood moms would like this. I come from a marketing background, and I felt that if I had this strong of a reaction to it, that there were other mothers out there in the community that would love this as much as I did. And so we started slowly and just built it over time. So we did that about 14 years ago now.
Oh, wow.
So tell me, where do you operate?
So we're headquartered out of Narberth, Pennsylvania, but the largest part of our business, about 86% of our business at this point, comes from summer camps. And so in the summertime, we are in 8 states, from Connecticut down to Virginia, and 45 different locations.
So what do you do at each of those camps? Do you provide the personnel and the program?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do everything. We're really like a turnkey solution.
Okay.
We partner with independent schools who offer camp programmings, or we are inside of another camp who wants to offer this kind of really niche market kind of activity. And so what we do is we develop the curriculum every year. We hire all the staff, we do all the checks, we do all the training, and then we're sort of a needle arts placement agency, putting our staff and our teams in all these different locations.
So what does needle arts do for the kids? Why is that helpful?
Sure. Needle arts is, so can kids live without needle arts? Absolutely, they can. But what I think it brings to them is this, if you've ever seen one of the kids come up with their finished product in their hands going, look what I did. The sense of confidence and accomplishment that they get from doing this kind of a thing. Because these are some pretty major tasks for these kids. Either they're working on a sewing machine, or they're knitting something, or they're hand stitching something. It takes a tremendous amount of patience and concentration and time. And so when they're finished, ultimately it's different than something that they could scribble quickly. They've put a lot of effort into it. And so I think that is the biggest walk away, is that the sense of accomplishment that they feel. And then again, it's a great activity for those shy children who want to be involved in something, who want to be in a group activity, so they can go, they can participate, can kind of keep their head down, and they can work on their work, and they listen to the conversation, and then they finally ultimately chime in when they're comfortable. So I think it's a really good social environment as well, and helps kids build some social skills. And then when they're adults, if they ever have the time, they'll be able to carry these skills on. There was a study done a long time ago that the kids that started these kinds of crafts before the age of 10, the likelihood that they would carry it into adulthood was much greater than if they started it in their teenage years or as an adult. So that would be nice to know that, we've produced this generation of crafters.
What's the most popular handwork project at different ages? So you said 3 to 16. I was surprised at the range that and the challenges that must bring. But what are the most popular handwork that given age of a child?
Right. So it is very much fine motor skill oriented. So the little kids, they're interested in the story and the texture and the feel. But we will do stitching with kids. So we start them that early with needles and threads and doing that. Then I would say at around 1st, 2nd grade, they're really beginning, and so knitting is a really big one for those 1st, 2nd graders. And then right now, what's so on trend is machine sewing for kids. So we begin machine sewing in 3rd grade. Our camp starts in 4th grade. That's all the rage. Knitting used to be the rage a few years ago. Now it's machine sewing. So kids just like making stuff that they can wear.
My mother made all of our dresses for the first umpteen years of our life, and I remember she was not satisfied till we knew how to cut a dress from a pattern and sew it on the sewing machine. It was like a rite of passage in our family.
Yeah. Do you have the opportunity ever?
No.
Yeah.
I'll come to your studio.
Yeah. And I think that's what also makes us really popular. I think the generation of moms, they want to do these kind of things for themselves, and they just don't have the time. Yeah. And so what they do is they live vicariously through their kids. And so they send them to this because it's something that they would enjoy for themselves.
Right.
Now at the studio, you have programs where, is it a structured program, or you come in for an hour and sew with your children, or?
Right, so we do year-round out of Narberth. We have after-school classes on Tuesdays through Sundays. And then on the weekends, we also do birthday parties and workshops. So we have a little bit of something for everybody depending on their schedule, right? Because that's our biggest competition, is trying to fit into a mom's schedule. So we have it from a one-day workshop where they can come in for 2 hours and make something for Mother's Day, or they can come every Monday or every Tuesday for 10 weeks. And we have a curriculum there. We like to give the kids a lot of choice. I think that's a big part of what we do, but we also give them a pretty structured framework from which to choose, which helps to guide them. You give them free rein and
with needles?
Yeah,
right.
We're all in trouble.
Right. What kind of camps are most open to what you're presenting? Is it, there's sports camps, do you find that there's a particular kind of camp?
So it's really interesting. There's a big kind of shift that's going on in the camping industry right now. So years ago, only overnight camps were considered true camps. And then these radical day camps started popping up, traditional 7-week day camps. Well, now the trend is these very vertical niche market camps. And so parents want enrichment for the kids, and they want really pretty specialized enrichment, and they want the ability to change it from week to week. They're finding less value, unfortunately, in just letting their kids run outside and play anymore. And so when we do these partnerships, the people that find tremendous value, that are looking for us, are these independent schools that understand that this is real education that the kids are learning, you know, besides just a craft. There's education that goes along. So a particular independent school might be offering the soccer and the basketball, but then they're offering Chinese and they're offering handwork. So what they want to do is provide a range of interests for their families to try to get as many families in as possible. Because there's such increased competition now with everyone calling themselves a camp, you know, from the shop down the street to whomever. So that's, I think those are really, you know, or other traditional day camps who understand that parents really want these niche market experiences. So they're now looking to us because they don't have the expertise, they don't have the supplies. They're looking to a vendor like myself who can come in and just provide that for them under their name and their umbrella.
Right.
Now, how do you find the staff to get the camps, right? Because it's pretty specialized. You have to train your teachers, right?
Yeah. So it's not as hard as you would think. However, it takes months. We hire about 100 people during these months right now.
Mostly college kids, or?
So I would say they are some college kids, you know, in a supporting role, clearly, art students. But then again, you know, recent graduates, artists who have flexible schedules, teachers. You know, who
Summer's off, right?
right, you know, who personally they might do needle arts at home. They don't do it in the school, so this is an opportunity. So we do that, and actually, it's an excellent question because your staff is just so important. Right now in Pennsylvania, the state of Pennsylvania, they're requiring all these clearances now, from background checks to child abuse checks to fingerprinting, and this is even for kids as young as 12 who might want to volunteer in your camp.
Oh, wow.
So everyone has to do that. And so that's one of the things as a parent you really want to look for in selecting a camp, is to make sure that the place that's actually calling themselves a camp are operating like a camp.
Right.
They're hiring the right kind of staff, they're getting all the clearances, they're doing appropriate training.
Right.
How do you ask those questions? Is there, do you ask the people that run the camp? Is there things they should show you that prove that they do all these, clearances?
Right. So we do it with all of our staff. So I actually have to make sure that the 100 people that I hire all have those background checks. And then the people that we partner with, they'll ask me that question.
Okay, gotcha.
Can you provide all your clearances?
Got you. Okay.
And so we keep all that on record.
How many children generally in a class setting? I'm just curious.
Sure. So it can be anywhere from 6 kids in a small new location up to 50 kids. Yeah,
What's
in a
the
particular
ratio between instructors and kids? I guess it varies by what they're doing, but
It's 1 to 6.
1 to 6.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's pretty intimate.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're getting a lot of attention. And again, with needles, you want them to get a lot of attention.
Right.
Exactly. So obviously a camp is a big part of the business. Do you see more studios around, or franchising out studios? What's the vision for the
So here's the business side of us
Yeah,
coming
right,
out,
ask about
right?
business.
Right.
Yeah,
Franchising. What
That's
are we
right. How are we
doing
gonna make money here?
Yeah, right. And let me ask you that question. How do I make money? No. Do I franchise? That's something that I wrestle with all the time. Do I franchise it? Right now, I'm really enjoying it because I enjoy the interaction with my parents. And I don't want to change that dynamic from working with parents to working with business owners, who I'm responsible for their
babysit them.
exactly, for their income and for their happiness and all that stuff. So franchising right now is not, we do want to see if this has national legs. So as I said, we're now in that northeast corridor there. And we're just growing it organically by hiring regional managers and doing it that way. Now, whether more studios or not, it takes a lot to run the studio on a year-round basis for 14% return. But it does give you a great cash flow, for that 14% in times when it's not summer and you're not getting camp money in.
Right.
So.
And it's year round, right? The studio, you said after
Right.
school and things like that. So.
Right, and having the studio year round really gives us an opportunity to test market, new projects, new ideas that we want to do, new techniques we want to introduce. So we can do that just with one class after school, as opposed to with 3,000 kids over the summertime and realize, oh, that wasn't really not a good idea.
Right.
So Laura, I was curious to go back to the question about where do you find your teachers, if you would, and you said teaching profession and artists and all. Retired people at all?
No, generally they tend to, and it's not that we wouldn't be happy, to have that kind of experience, but we find it tends to be more younger artists.
Okay.
And I think because it's exhausting.
Right.
It's
not one-on-one, it's six-on-one.
It's
right.
6-on-1,
Yeah.
and often, sitting on the floor.
Right.
And so I think they're not looking for that kind of experience.
Sure.
Yeah, they find the grandkids exhausting, right?
Right, exactly.
So you said that now the needlework is the machine needle is what did you call it? Machine
Sewing machine?
Sewing machine.
Machine sewing, yeah.
Machine sewing. Okay, so that's sort of the popular one.
Yeah.
Are there ones that you would like to add that you haven't really had an opportunity yet? Whether it's different kinds of crocheting or.
That's really
My
interesting.
grandmother used to do tacking. Is tacking crocheting?
Right.
It always seemed a little different.
Yeah. So that's a form of tatting. I believe is a form of tatting.
Okay.
Is
I thought it was always
right.
tacking. I didn't know tatting.
It might be. There
Okay.
could have been something that I don't know
Right.
about. But if it's tatting we're talking about, which is just sort of a form of these bobbins and intricate braiding and really beautiful and things like that. So, yeah, I mean, I think that there are sometimes new techniques we're thinking about, like silk screening and bringing in some other forms of handwork that might be a nice addition to handwork to go coincide with handwork. So we do that from time to time. But, we also try to keep it age appropriate.
Right.
That will keep their attention.
Right.
So Laura, we're running out of time. If somebody wanted to find out if your needlework is offered at a camp, how do they do that?
Sure. So what they would do is go to our website, and which is www.thehandworkstudio.com, and on our camp page there's a button for locations, and we have all of our locations.
Great,
posted
thank you
there.
so much.
Thank
No,
you.
thanks for having me.
Thank
That was
you.
great.
Please join us next week for our next guest is Adam Newman from SFG Investment Advisors, and he's going to talk about financial planning. So as always, your money matters. Thank you.